next investigation about solving quadratic equations starts with square roots. Now we know that, say we ask one number squared equals 4. Let's find out how to answer this question. Then you probably will say, oh, we know one number at least. There's a quick answer to that, which is 2 squared equals 4, because 2 times 2 is 4. Now there's a second answer to this question, which is negative 2 squared is also 4. Because negative 2 squared means you multiply by another negative 2. That will also give us 4. Okay, so there are two answers to this question. 2 or negative 2. Now here, we call 2 the square root of 4. We use the notation. Square root notation. So we write square root of 4 equals 2. Okay. In a way that this notation indeed refers to the positive choice, or we say the non-negative choice for the number whose square is 4. So square root of 4 equals 2, and then similarly, you probably would know, or at least anticipate, square root of 9 is the positive number whose square is 9. Now that will be 3. Okay, square root of 16. Now whose number will be 16? 4 would do. Now how about 25? Square root of 25 is 5. And so on and so forth. Now that being said, say how about negative 2? This is how we see it. So, say if I want to solve x squared equals 4. If we want to solve x squared equals 4, now we know 2 is an answer, but negative 2 is another answer. Now in notation, people usually write this way. X equals plus minus 2. Okay. So in a way that if you use plus minus 2, this means plus 2 gives you a solution and minus 2 gives you another solution. Now you may have observed this. If x equals 4, if x squared equals 4, then x is plus minus square root of 4, because square root of 4 is 2, and square root of 4 refers to the number whose square is 4, which is plus minus 2. And then x squared equals 9. Now this equation poses a question that what number has 9 as a square? Okay, the answer is, well, plus minus 3. Okay, so plus minus square root of 9, which is plus minus 3. Now, if we write down another, you pretty much get the idea. If I have x squared equals 16, then x is plus minus square root of 16, which is plus minus 4. Okay, now in general, we like you to observe that, say, if x squared equals a certain number, then x is always plus minus of that, the square root of that very particular number. So if we have an equation called x squared equals k, then x should be plus minus square root of k. Now note that this k refers to anything, okay, and this formula or this equation really describes the pattern that we have observed earlier, which is when x squared equals a certain number, x is always plus minus of the square root of that number. Okay. Now for simplicity in this situation, we actually would like to assume k to be positive or at least 0. Okay, now that requirement can be dropped in the future. Okay, now let's also give you another remark. So when you calculate the square root, square root of 9 equals 3, we sort of understand that because you kind of think backwards, okay? Whose square is 9? 3 seem to work. Now if you have square root of 16, this refers to a number whose square is 16, and 4 is that number. Now, what happens if we are required to calculate square root of 5? Now I would be forced to think on top of my head, whose square, what number has square equals 5, and it is not 2. It is also not 3. It is also not other numbers that we can think of, but that's okay. In order to calculate square root of 5, you're going to need a calculator. What you do is you take out a calculator and punch the square root button and punch 5 and enter. Okay, so that's very easy. To calculate this value, on the other hand, you have to use a calculator, okay, most of the time. And if you use a calculator, this is roughly 2.236 with a few, with the endless decimal places, okay? Endless string of decimal places. Now similarly, square root of 2, you can't really imagine this on top of your head because 1 does not work. And 2 squared equals 4 also doesn't work. So this is something between 1 and 2. Okay. So again, use a calculator. You may be able to find out that this is 1.414 and a lot more behind that. Okay. Now that being said, let's look at one example. So say if there is an equation looks like this, x squared equals 15, can we solve x? This is what we do. Okay, we just know earlier that if I have a square, then to remove the square, I just take the square root. And I take the plus minus the square root of this number. So this is like a one-line answer. X equals plus minus square root of 15. You're going to need to use a calculator on square root of 15. You'll find out this is 3 point something. Now let's look at the slightly harder example. Say if you want to solve 2x squared minus 1 equals 8. It will still be no different. I'm going to need to do the algebra until I have x squared equals a certain number. And once I have x squared equals a certain number, x is plus minus the square root of that number. So we seek to isolate x squared, or we say we seek to solve for x squared to begin with. So I would add 1 from both sides. So I have 2x squared equals 9. Okay, I still need to isolate x squared, so I divide by 2. So I have x squared equals 9/2. This is 4.5. Okay. So finally, x is plus minus the square root of that number, 9/2. And that is our answer. Now we have your last example before you try some problems on your own. So our last example is this. We'd like to solve the square of x minus 3 equals 5. Now this is how we solve this problem. First of all, you see a certain quantity square equals 5. So what do I know about this quantity? When something square equals 5, that something is plus minus square root of 5. So x minus 3 squared equals 5. I will remove the square, but then this 5 is going to become plus minus square root of 5. But that's what we learned before. Something square equals 5. That something must be plus minus square root of 5. Now I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So I have this solution, which is x equals 3 plus minus square root of 5. Now let's not be confused by this notation. What this really means is there are two solutions. If you use plus sign here, that'll give us a solution. If you use a minus sign here, that would get us the other solution.